MakeShack, Episode 5.
So today we're going to take a little walk through the edge of the woods here, and we're looking for branches or other pieces offcut from trees, which I've recently had to take down. We have emerald ash boring beetles here, and they're terrible, they're awful, and they have really devastated our ash trees. So we're coping with that and getting some of them taken down that endanger structures or will endanger structures in the near future. So as a result, there's a fair pile of offcuts here. And in here should be some reasonable wood for carving spoons. Looks like we've got some poplar. Some of this looks more like it might be ash, might be hickory or something similar. The darker stuff here looks hickory-like. This I think is definitely a poplar log. So maybe we'll grab a couple of these. There's some interesting shaped pieces. That's a funky one right there. That ought to be interesting to find a spoon or something in. And I'll collect a couple of these up and we'll go sit by the shop and carve spoons. Silly ladies. Come on. All right, let's start with this small round here. Low cost of entry and good warm-up piece. So today, using a froe and a mallet, and just line up the froe on one of these nice cracks that we already have. Use that weakness. And pop right through. Alright, so there's two halves. I think I'll go for 2 spoons out of each of these. All else being equal. Okay. Take off some of that unnecessary pith. And see if I can't also get rid of the bark and sapwood. All right. Looks like we've got some checking that might be a long-term issue there, but that's a billet we can at least take a crack at. Again, take off the heartwood, get rid of some of the sapwood. And here's a couple of billets we'll start with. So we'll get our tools ready. and kind of go through these a little bit. Where'd you go? There you are. All right. So the first and most important tool we're going to use is the strop. This thing keeps all these carving tools ridiculously sharp and smooth, and that gives you a very nice smooth surface when you're done. Heavy work will be done here with the carving hatchet. So this is a nice one, the Grand Force Brooks, and I love this thing. It does a great job. So that's what we'll be doing the bulk carving with. And then the Sloyd knife for use for the flat carving, the detail work, and then this really beautiful bowl carving hoop, which I've absolutely loved working with. This thing's really a beauty. So that's the basic tools. Let's get to work. So I'm getting down low here. This is a low stump, and I want to make sure that I've got good control, and if the axe does anything unexpected, it ends up in the stump instead of in me. Start just by cleaning the billet up, giving it a couple of nice edges, just because that kind of helps me visualize what I've got to work with. This is not a carving tutorial, so go find somebody who's good at that to learn, first of all, the safety. I'm doing a lot of things here to make sure that I don't remove a digit, and you should too, because you need those for a lot of stuff. Okay, so take a look at the grain. Decide what goes where. I'm going to put the bowl down here because I have a couple of checks in this end that I can see run at least a 1/2 to 3/4 inch in. So I'm going to center my bowl kind of back here, the handle here. There's some checks there, but that's less important in the handle. So, begin shaping that bowl. Okay. Go get the saw real quick. I will put some stop cuts in here for the handle. A lot of times I'll actually draw the pattern I'm looking for. I'll sketch the spoon as I go with a grease pencil. Most of the time, in fact. But today I'm just feeling it. I feel like going crazy. I feel like just winging it. Excellent. Okay, so now we have our basic blank. Got the beginning of a spoon bowl shape there. I took a little bit of the excess off back here, so I don't have to carve that all with the knife. Got some stop cuts in here. They're not very even. Even that out later. That one might be deeper than I want. This may end up being... No, I'll have it narrow enough. Yeah, that'll be fine. I might cut this one deeper. Anyway, so now I'm going to just split this off so I can just break that all off in one big chunk, and then I don't have to carve it. Kind of the secret to this is doing lots and lots of work with your coarse tools to save you a bunch of time later. So I'm just going to follow up to where I think that ends. Pop it off. That's a lot of work done all at once. And there we go. That's a very rough spoon blank. Here's another way I sometimes work. Okay, that's a very thick blank. That didn't get much thinner riving, so take a minute to hack some of that off. Okay. Okay. All right. That's some very rough shaping. These are some eating spoons, so they'll be smaller, kind of like a teaspoon, somewhere between a teaspoon and a tablespoon, like a soup spoon, you might call it. So I like to use them to have yogurt in the morning. Oops, that was a little deep. I misjudged that. Oh, busted. That's why you got to be careful. All right, so we'll start with this one. I can see I'm going to have lots of help today. All right, first step of carving. And my shop is, well, I don't think it's my shop. I think it's just this part of the country is murderous on tools. This knife has been sitting in a nice closed box in a sheath in a closed shop that's got good, I mean, not sealed, but it's got a lot of wood and whatnot to absorb swings and humidity, and it is just coated with surface rust. This is super annoying. Okay. Alrighty. First things first is to work off these shoulders. What are you looking for there? Who are you? Ruby? What are you looking for there, Ruby? You think I'm carving you up some nice worms? Some delicious worms? Yum. Mm-hmm. All right. So now I want to give myself a nice flat plane up at the spoon bowl here, into which I can carve the bowl hollow. So I've got a little bit of punk here, some pulp caused by boring insects. So that's not going to be super conducive to being in my spoon bowl, so I'm probably going to have to carve my way through that. Apparently today's episode is going to be spoon carving with chicken. Not a concept I had even considered. Okay. Still a little out of whack. Whenever I watch spoon carving videos, I see them looking at it, and they can totally see things, and I can never see it. And it's not because you don't know what you're looking for, it's because there's just, I'm so much closer and I'm getting so much more detail than you are. It's the loss you get from filming an event rather than being in person. So don't feel bad that you don't see why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's not you. It's just the low fidelity data source you're working from. Okay, so now I have a nice, fairly smooth, fairly flat surface into which I may carve the bowl. I'm gonna take this point off the spoon that always messes with my head. Get this into a nice, fairly reasonable oval. Got to take that axe cut out of there. This end grain is where a third of the work is, in my opinion. Always so much work. So as you saw, we picked this up off the ground. It was a standing dead tree 2 weeks ago, maybe? 3 weeks ago, tops. So it's not dead green. It's not like going out and cutting down a live tree and using it right away. So it's not dead green, but it's, I would say, it's not even firewood dry yet. So it's still a pretty green piece of wood. So as I'm carving it here, I've got most of the benefits of that green wood. But I'm able to use some otherwise wasted offcuts. You could always burn them, and I will burn what I don't use out there, but to my mind, a spoon is better than firewood. And so I'm going to use up as much of it as I can on this kind of work as I can before it's just not any good anymore. Or I run out of firewood. Because firewood is better than burning natural gas. Or propane, as the case may be. So I'm just working on shaping, trying to get a reasonable outline here. And I'm just looking at this in 2D, just a plan view. So that outline shape. This is nice contemplative work. It's something you can do outside, should do. Well, I hear some people carve inside, and I guess this is no worse than a lot of the other messes you vacuum up in your house, but I just have a really hard time doing this kind of messy work in the house. Just can't get my head around it. But it certainly is nice, and on a day like today, man, you can't beat this. This is beautiful out here. Okay. Zeroing in on my shape. I'm not a stickler for uniformity. I'm not a stickler for balance even. I don't need it to be exactly the same on both sides. But it does need to be usable as a spoon to eat from. So I am paying some attention to the overall shape, and it's not like twice as wide of a curve on the left or the right, because you really can sense that weirdness when you're eating with a spoon. And that's one of the things that I'll be doing as I go along here. Once I get a little closer, I actually put it in my mouth, see if it feels like a spoon. Okay. So now I'm starting to look in the other direction, this top here. So I've got a spoon bowl, a little bit of a back too, a little bit of spine, rises up and down in the handle. I think that looks nice. And I think it maybe gives you a little bit of ergonomics in the spoon. One thing I've decided is that really wild shapes are fun to look at and they're kind of fun to carve sometimes, but my hand at least is fairly intolerant of a crazy shape when it comes to something I'm like eating with, something I'm using a lot. And for that reason, I'll often stick to a fairly boring seeming spoon pattern. But they work well, and I like them. And some of these shapes are just classic, and they're developed as classics for a reason. Part of that might be habituation, that I'm just used to having manufactured spoons, which tend to be fairly standard. There's not a lot of variation in the overall shape of a spoon from one manufacturer to another, or even one time period to another. At least not that I've seen. All right, basic outline of a spoon. Now, carve the bowl. Come on, there you go. So this is one of the most satisfying and simultaneously disappointing parts of carving a spoon. That's because once you get into this, it's just so gratifying to carve these subtle rounded shapes and to get these bowls, and the feel of dragging this tool across the grain is just really satisfying. And you want to do it a lot. But the bowl of a spoon is just really shallow. It's just not that big. And so you don't really get to enjoy this nearly as much as you might hope. It's a really funny thing. Like, so many times I've gotten to the point where I know I have to quit. This spoon bowl is already too deep. It's going to be uncomfortable, and I'm going to have to cut down the shoulders of it because I overcarved it, but I just don't stop because it's so enjoyable. And I'll make a ton of extra work for myself because I really like using the gouge here. Hook knife, depending on your tradition. So what I'm going for now is the deepest part of the bowl back here at the shoulders, shallowest up at the front, even and well spread with the same rim, a little bit of flat area around it in all directions that I can then tune up with the Sloyd knife. And once I've got that, then I have to put this tool away, and I don't get to do any more. The thing I like most about this loop is this shape right here. So I can carve nice deep rounds by using it this way. But if this angle right here, this particular shape is ideal. It's exactly what I want out of my spoon bowls. So almost like using a bench plane, when I'm taking an even, smooth, clean cut along the entire length of that bowl, that shape, then I'm done. So I'm being awfully precious with this today. Probably not bad. This is my first spoon in ages. I have not carved a spoon in a long time, so it's probably wise to be conservative. But if you're thinking about this and you're worried about it being too difficult or making mistakes or anything, this is firewood. You're not wasting anything. You could screw this up 300 times, and all you've done is spend a very nice day out in the woods, or your yard, or your deck, or whatever. And it's just there's no reason not to do this. It's a great time, and it feels good to do. And if you get even one halfway decent spoon, man, you have never had better yogurt than you will have eating it with that spoon. It's just such a kick. Okay, so that's it. That's all the bowl carving I'm going to do. Now it's time to start trimming up around here. As you can see, it's still a rather thick spoon. So let's do some hogging off here. Sharpen early, sharpen often. And to those out there who are pedantic, no, this isn't sharpening. You're absolutely right. This is polishing. It's not even honing anymore. I do have a honing compound down here, so I guess maybe there's a definition there that I understand, but I'm not shaping the blade. I'm not removing nicks. I'm not uh, even affecting the geometry. All I'm really doing is removing scratches, removing burrs, and giving myself a nice polish. It does make it cut nicer, and it leaves a much nicer surface. So it's totes worth it. Here I'm using my knife as a splitting wedge, uh, coming in on these little shoulders here and splitting off chunks. If it's not a finished edge, then it doesn't matter how you get rid of the wood. The faster the better, frankly. Okay, now that's it. I can't cut any more there. That's as far as I'm going. So I got to watch that. Looks like I've got a chunk here to take off. Silly ladies. So I am going to carefully cut this down with the axe. Alright, so that's a bunch of wood removed quickly. And now I'll go back to cleaning and shaping and refining. I guess I tend to do the bowl first. It's the trickier part. I'm more likely to screw it up. And that way I don't waste effort that I put into the handle if I screw up the bowl of the spoon. Uh, it's more interesting. So every once in a while I eat my dessert first. And this is one of those cases. I will very frequently in life do the hardest work first and leave the fun stuff for later. But this does not seem to be one of those cases. In spoon carving, I seem to allow myself to just do the fun part and trust that I'll still finish it up afterwards. And also, it gives me a nice handle to hold on to. If this was finished, it would be not nearly as hefty and strong, and so I would be concerned about putting a lot of pressure on it, and I wouldn't be able to hold it and use it as the lever that I am right now. So I've got a basic shape. I can feel that it's in the ballpark all the way around the same. And so now the goal is to refine that ever thinner. I want to get that bowl down to a pretty thin cross section. How thin, Robbie? Well, gosh, how about 3/32? So a little bit more than the 16th, halfway between a 16th and an eighth. It's pretty thin. Um, most spoon woods are plenty strong for that. There's no issue with the strength of the wood. The problem that I have encountered sometimes is I will end up using ring porous woods, things like hickory and oak, and the porosity, oak especially, there's really nothing you can do with oak. It'll leak because the pores of the wood are so open that the liquid will just run through the early wood right out and just basically leak out of your spoon. So if you're eating your soup, that is no bueno. Thicker foods, clearly not an issue. Painting them and decorating them and hanging them on your wall, you'll never even know. Depends what you do with your spoon. So this is one of the other nice parts about this is all the refining. You get to do some work and look, and then it's closer to what you were planning, and it allows you to see smaller details that need to be fixed. And as you continually go through and fix those smaller details, it gets closer and closer to ideal. And every time you improve it, it allows you to see a new layer of possible improvements. They're not necessarily defects, certainly not once you really get down into the nitty gritty of it and you've been working on it for a while. But it's just a refinement you could choose to make, and it almost becomes style at some point. Depends on what you're going for. It could be style, how it looks, or it could be functionality, how you think it's going to work. Okay, now I really need to focus on thickness. I've heard it said that if you want to learn about wood grain, carve. And I suspect that is more intended towards relief type carving, flat goods carving, putting shapes into panels. But it's also true of things like this, green wood carving, because there are a lot of transition points in a spoon. Right here, the grain switches, well, this grain stays the same direction, but because the curve works like this, the curve goes this way. From here forward, I have to carve that way. From here back, I have to carve back this way. Otherwise, I'll split it off. That worked to my advantage earlier when I was trying to take off big chunks. But now, I'm refining, and big chunks are not where it's at. So I'm deciding, do I want to risk a big chunk here? And I do. But that's it. Now I got to come back and clean this up. Okay. And we're getting close. The front is pretty close at this stage. By comparison, the front looks great, but I know that once I get the back cleaned out, it'll be like I said, I'm going to go back and I'm going to see that front and think to myself, I can thin that out. That's looking a little thick and chunky. I end up with these bruises all over my chest and my stomach from the handle of the spoon. A lot of times I'll actually carve these little corners off to make this less painful. I didn't think to do that this time. Proof positive that I haven't carved a spoon in too long. Ah, nice. Okay. Good, good. Coming along. Little pieces. It's getting harder for me to remember to talk because I'm concentrating much more carefully on what I'm doing. If I go quiet, don't worry. I'm just thinking, focused on what I'm working on. Okay. So I always end up really thick here, and it takes me a long time in the process to get that carved down thin. So I'm going to try to do that a little bit more now. Okay. So here's what we've got so far. Make sure you can see this. Yeah. So here's our bowl. You can see the depth on my thumb there. It's what is that? An eighth of an inch deep, maybe. It's not very deep, but that's really all that you're used to. If you were to have a much deeper spoon, you would find it catches on the corner of your mouth. And it's got a nice, reasonably flat top. It's fairly consistent that direction. This is about the same. The little flat rim here is about the same, and the only unrefined part really is here at the handle. So that'll come up next. All right, handle. I need to really come up with a handle design that I can make, because I always wing it, and it's just random. But I think I'm going to taper this down. Kind of gently. Yeah, I'm liking that. Let's bring this down. Okay, so this one I can already feel is going to have a curved handle. And that I'm totally okay with. That is the wood informing the shape. The grain in this handle runs in that direction. And I find that quirky and charming and other such words people use to describe imperfections, which I think are also quite perfect. Okay, good, good, good. I'm liking that. Sometimes up close you see a little bit of just a detail. You would never see it in the spoon as a whole because it's just too small of a part. So now here's like definitely a place got to be careful because I can come through here and catch this bowl and snap off huge chunks of it. So I need to really start using more control in my cuts to make sure I don't do that. Okay, lovely. Good, I'm liking these lines. So just keep on working down. Gonna need to leave I'm gonna leave some chunk in that neck because I got to work back here for a while. And again, the more you take away, the less you have to hold on to. And it is altogether too possible to break a spoon in half uh, while carving it, which I'll admit is moderately disappointing. I don't mind throwing away a piece at the stump when all I've got is the time I spent carrying it out of the woods into it. That's really no big deal. But the closer I get to a finished piece, the less risks I find I'm willing to take with it. There's probably a plateau of craftsmanship there that I will hit where that will prevent me from making better pieces. But I don't think I'm there yet, so I'm continuing to work as I do. Take my big swings early, and as the successes pile up, start to bank some of that value. Okay. Now we're getting there. It's another pattern you'll see in spoon carving sometimes, and might have been Jared Dahl that I heard it from. You start thin at the end, so you get thin here, and leave this fat, and work your way back towards the middle. That's more of that keeping the bulk in the middle so you don't snap it in half concept, which makes a lot of sense to me. So I'm cutting a clean surface on the end here. That's fun. I like that. So I've got that kind of a little modern quirk on the end, a little angle. I think what I'm just going to do is just chamfer this and leave this as it on the handle. It's kind of a fun little funky rectangular shape. Okay, so we're pretty close there. Gotta do some more thinning up here. So close. So I'm going to now hollow the edges here a little bit. Chamfers, really, really shallow chamfers. And that's just going to give it a nicer ergonomic feel. I want it to still look and basically be rectangular, but rectangles aren't terribly comfortable in the human hand. So I've just taken two long, deep feathers out of that. So on top, it's still a nice flat rectangle. From underneath, it has sort of a keel shape, the feather shape. You've got a central line running up the middle, and then it feathers back here and feathers back here. And that feels nice. Oh, so thick. Wow. You don't realize how thick that is until you try to eat with it. All right, now bravery time. How thin can I go? And as we get closer and closer to finished, the size of these refinements in absolute value get much, much smaller, but the percentage change is probably pretty similar. So depending on how you look at things, you don't worry that it's getting inefficient. You're not necessarily getting fiddly, if you use that word in a negative sense. You are just making scale appropriate changes. And I'm using my fingers as calipers there to feel through. You can't see the thickness down in the center there. You can see it up at the edge, And then once you adjust your fingers there and you move them around, you'll be amazed at how well you can feel the differences. I'm getting dangerous there. I'm cutting the wrong way on the grain, and that is causing big chips, which are scary at this point. This is the hardest position for me to hold. There's just very little grip. So I was pushing the end in there, so I'm holding these two back here, pushing there, and that gives me a little bit of stability. But that's not a great position to carve in. I'm trying to maintain my center there as I go. Getting some nice low light off the sun here, and it's making it really easy to see imperfections in the surface. That's really nice, showing up the shadow lines brilliantly. A little bit too wide. The ideal shape appears to be more oval than round for sure, and a bit teardrop shaped. I've still got some shoulder left, so I've got plenty to work with. Okay. That was a big cut. So now we got to match into it. But it was a good cut. Now we're starting to get down to the right size. You like how I include you in this? It's plural. It's not just me. I'm not doing this alone. You're here with me. Appreciate the help. Makes this all so much easier. So this is something different I'm trying this time as well, are these really square edges. I think every other spoon I've carved before, I've made that a sweep that I could carve in a single continuous cut. in order to make sure that I don't get short grain or ugliness in there. But treating it as a shoulder seems to be working. Okay. All right, got a bit of a lump right there. The rest of it is really, really close. The other thing I need to remember is that this is still wet, so this is going to dry. This will sit somewhere for a week maybe and dry out. I'll probably try to slow that process down by putting it in like a bag of shavings. So I'll collect up some of my shavings here, put them in a plastic bag or a little box or drawer or whatever, somewhere isolated, and let the whole thing dry out so it's a bigger mass. Won't dry as quickly because you don't have to crack. Though I think this spoon is probably pretty good. It's very thin. The best protection against cracking is thinness, or at least a uniform thickness, but still thin. So what that means is after it dries, then you've got nice dry hardwood and you can come back and put really clean final lines on it. So the final dressing happens, the kind of for pretty carving happens after it's had a chance to dry out. But I want to make this as thin and consistent as I can before it dries. And also, if it's your first spoon and you're like, wait a week, are you crazy? Yeah, I would be crazy to suggest that. If you've just carved your first spoon and you are just dying to use it, then by gum, go use it. It's your spoon. This spoon is more yours than any spoon you've ever owned before this because you created it. You made it. You own this spoon in a way that you've never owned anything in your life. And that's pretty fantastic. So what I will suggest is if you're going to take this in the house and use it now, put some oil on it. And that will keep the food staining down. That helps fill the pores. Wood is, in general, historically anyway, a fairly safe thing. Not a lot of germs and foodborne illnesses and whatever live in wood. I'm not a doctor. Don't sue me. And certainly don't take my advice if you're worried about those things. But you'll find lots of historical examples of people using wooden vessels and spoons and plates, and it all working out just fine. And there's good reasons for that, but I'm not going to pretend to be able to explain them. So there we go. A couple of very fine chamfers. Oh, oil, right. So any oil will work. Things like canola oil, corn oil, regular vegetable oils like you might cook with will go rancid, and you will taste that and smell it on the spoon. So what I prefer to use is walnut oil. And walnut oil, and I believe safflower oil, and uncured pure food grade linseed oil, I believe. are all good because they don't go rancid, and over time they will actually oxidize and form a sort of a film finish, which is really nice and it protects your spoon really well. So in my local grocery stores, of those oils, I can only find walnut oil. Uh, I've used the roasted walnut oil, but I don't like it very much. I don't like the flavor. So I try to use pure regular walnut oil. And you can wipe it on liberally. It's going to absorb into the end grain a great deal. So the bowl will absorb a ton of oil, the handle less. You can also just, soak it in oil. You can put it in a bottle of oil that you keep for your spoons and soak it in there for as long as you can stand. The more oil it absorbs, the better. And it will also cure a little bit in the oil. So that's good too. And then once you've got some oil on there, let it soak in as long as you can stand. Dry it off with a clean rag and get yourself a big bowl of ice cream or yogurt or whatever it is that you want to eat with your new spoon that you just carved along with me. I've just decided that you're carving a spoon along with me if you want to, or at least I would love to hear about it if you did. So, give me a comment. Let me know if you carve a spoon, and if you did, what you think of it. And there you go. It's my first spoon in ages. I don't even know how long, and I'm relatively happy with it. I think, yep, needs a little refinement, but that'll wait. Good spoon. All right. So this was a little bit of a different one. I had a bunch of video shot for the rest of the grinder build, which is well on its way. But I had done some pre-editing for those, and all of that work kind of blew up. So because I have to do that over, today's was a nice little short one-off of carving a spoon. I hope you'll get out and carve yourself a spoon and tell me all about it. So thanks for joining me. Have a great time. Enjoy the weather while you can, and let me know what you're doing. All right, thank you.
Zabanza bulu ya ndunu gadari ya Kongo.